Hello, everyone. I'm seeing that people are joining now. My name is Alejandra. I'm the marketing director of Virtual Latinos, and I have here Jaime Nakach, our CEO and founder. So we are going to wait for a few minutes just to let everybody join. And we are very, very happy to have you here. We are going to talk about a great topic that sometimes we have a lot of questions, a lot of doubts. So Jaime will be here to answer all the questions that you have. We are going to use the Q&A section below. So you can write all the questions that you have and he will be answering after the webinar. We will have a Q&A section. So please, if you don't see that we are answering the questions right away, it's because we are going to do it at the end. So I present you to Jaime Nakach. He will be hosting this webinar today, and I'll be helping if you have any questions as well.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very happy to be here. I haven't done a webinar in some time now. This is the first time we're doing this on Zoom, even though we use Zoom every day of our lives in this remote work. We hadn't actually done a webinar through Zoom, so we're very excited to try this platform specifically for this. So hopefully it'll work out and we'll continue to use it because I think everybody's already used to using Zoom. So I want to personally first start by saying that, I think that this topic specifically, it's really unique in the way that we're going to be approaching this, because we sometimes directly have had webinars in terms of how to hire, why you should hire, but we realized there's a key differentiator between our successful clients and VAs and those who are not as successful. And that's the fact that those who are more successful tend to be more prepared before they hire, while they're hiring, and after they're hiring. So kind of this webinar is going to be touching upon those subjects in terms of how to get ready before you're actually starting the process for hiring someone, how to be successful during the process, which of course that's why we're also here as a company to help, and then how to do that afterwards, right? So we're going to talk about those steps in, of course, more detail. So first, this is me. I'm the founder and CEO of Virtual Latinos, and I'm here in San Diego, California. And so many entrepreneurs and small business owners hire virtual assistants in many cases with no idea on how to make the relationship successful. In fact, I'd say that the majority of our clients have not hired an assistant in the past, which is why it's very important that if you're one of those, that you definitely pay attention to how this might be helpful to you. Because yes, virtual assistants are great and they're very useful, and there's huge benefits of hiring people to work for your company. But if you really want to think about this for the long term, which is exactly the topic of today's presentation, there's a lot of key things that you should consider, right? So that's what we're going to be covering today. So here's how we divided this presentation. This is not a typical 1-hour webinar, which is what most webinars are. We did put 90 minutes, which is an hour and a half for this. I'm going to try to go through the information in about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we're going to have time for questions. But if I see that there's a lot of questions, I can also, do the content a little faster. So the first part is benefits of long-term relationships. We're going to talk about why that is important. Then we're going to dive into the preparing to hire your next virtual assistant, how to have a great interview with the assistant, then the onboarding process for welcoming the assistant into your company, the ongoing work relationship for the day-to-day things that you do with them, as well as growing your business, all right? Which is, of course, a key aspect as well. Not only if you're going to hire just one person, but potentially if you're going to hire more than one. Right now, I think in our company, the average client hires about 1.3 to 1.4 assistants. So definitely now more than one, which is generally speaking pretty good. So let's get going. So the first part, benefits of long-term relationships with your assistant. Now, let me say that yes, we keep putting here the VA, those two letters, but we are internally now trying to rebrand this terminology of virtual assistant to virtual professionals, because the reality is that we have a lot of actual professionals that happen to be working virtually, as opposed to them being assistants that happen to be working virtually. They're really not just assistants. So just to keep that in mind. So the first benefit of long-term relationships is that in the long term, as well as in the short term, the idea is to build a relationship with this person as part of your team, so that you actually end up saving time and energy from having to potentially explain or train people multiple times if they were to leave, let's say, after the short term, right? And maybe that's pretty obvious, but the reality is that we see a lot of platforms that just focus on getting an assistant quickly to people, but then is not necessarily the best assistant in terms of working out for the longest term. And we know, because we're our own business as well, we've gone through this process, which is why we built this company. Hiring takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money. So the longer that you can keep working with your assistant, basically the better, right? And that is actually the core of our company's focus. We only want to work with both assistants and companies who want to work long term, right? And of course, the less training and the less repeating processes and how to teach people how to do things, the more free time that you have to do other things, right? To focus on the bigger picture of whether that's, of course, your life or your business. Now, your business grows as your virtual employees grow, right? So the more that you teach people that are part of your team how it all works, the faster and the better that they can then potentially then help you train other people that you might hire after them. So recently I was talking to someone about, how many people I've actually personally trained in my team. And after counting, I think it was just 5. We have a team of about 35 people, but I've personally only trained 5, right? So I trained those people who are now the heads and the directors of each department, and then they started training other people, right? So that's a huge benefit because the better that they get to be at what you do, and then it becomes part of, obviously their daily tasks, the better it is for everybody. And then the obvious one that we sort of already mentioned, you save time and money from recruitment, right? You don't have to keep thinking about, okay, now I need to find more people, more interviews, more investing time and money in talking to people to hire to replace potentially people that have left, right? And that is, again, something that you don't really want to do. And I'm proud to say that we have already have assistants in our community that have worked with us for close to 4 years. So that, of course, makes me very proud. And in fact, I'm going to say that we are in the process of evaluating software that might make our hiring even better in terms of matching the right types of candidates to the right types of clients and jobs, not just from our own internal experience, but also with, let's call it a more advanced software that's going to help us decide things a little better. Okay. So to build a successful long-term client and virtual professional relationship, you have to start by building a good foundation, right? So you need to start going from the beginning. What do I need to make it so that the assistant is happy working with me, and vice versa, right? It really is like any other relationship, whether it's, a friend, a family, or business. You got to make sure that you can trust them, they can trust you, and you're going to be able to work with them and continue to grow with them. So step number 1, preparing to hire your next virtual professional. This is kind of going now into the next section, that's section number 2 that we spoke about, how to start preparing. And let me tell you that this is a step that I think that is definitely the most important. When I started this company, before I actually had this company, I hired, as some of you may know, my own assistants in the Philippines. And I literally said, okay, I have no idea, what are these people going to help me do, right? And so figuring that out is actually much better to stop and make a list before you start talking to either candidates or agencies. You really got to figure out what you need. Now, the good thing about working with our company specifically is that we do help you go through that process a bit. When you're speaking to our recruitment consultants, we really guide you a lot through this process to make sure that you really know what you need. It's very common that people just think they know what they need, but then once they talk to us, they're like, oh yeah, you're right. This is actually really what I'm looking for, right? But here we're going to just kind of outline some of those things in terms of how to make the list to make it useful for you. So tasks that are time consuming, tasks that are repetitive, tasks that you don't want to do, you don't have time to do, you shouldn't be doing, or you don't know how to do, right? Anything that you shouldn't be spending your time on should be given to someone else. Now, I'm not going to quote exactly what I remember from the book that I read specifically before I hired an assistant, but I remember that when you're thinking about the tasks that you're writing down, you got to think about, is this a tasks that's worth $100, let's say, if your time is worth $100, or is this something that's worth $10 in terms of paying someone else to help you do it, right? And anything that you shouldn't be spending as the owner or your team's time doing it, it's probably something that you should outsource, right? Because things that are either repetitive or not so complicated that you can potentially outsource, you should, right? So that's step number two. Step number two, sorry, that was step number one. Step number two, make a list of the tasks that the VA will help you with. So, sorry, the first step usually, if you can read it, you can create the list either in Excel or in Word. That's obviously up to you. I specifically created my list initially on Excel, and I created the lists of all the tasks in one row, and then on another column, for example, I created categories, right? What types of tasks? Are these admin tasks, sales tasks, marketing tasks? And then I would then had another column that would prioritize them in terms of how important they are. Are they very important to be done immediately, or they're not so important tasks that are mid-level importance, or long-term importance, right? And so once you kind of categorize all your different tasks in terms of categories and priority, then you can have, for example, a third column that says, can this be done by somebody else, or does it have to be done by me, right? Is there something that only really you know how to do, and there's no way, at least initially, that you can teach anybody to do it? So of course you will do it. But anything else that you could probably teach, that's obviously what you're going to be doing, right? But definitely an important thing is to realize that you got to have realistic expectations. You can't just think that anything that you need help with can be easily necessarily done by somebody else, unless you either properly train them or they already have the right skills, right? And then back to what I was mentioning before, prioritizing tasks between high-level tasks or low-level priorities and tasks. All right. Now, figuring out what are your assistants going to do, right? So yes, you need help. You're very busy. There's so many things to do. You don't even know where to start. And that's a key thing. We speak with lots of clients every day who need a lot of different helps in different industries. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every industry is going to need the exact same things, but many industries have many things in common, right? In terms of the types of assistance that they would need help with. I'm not going to get right now into detail of how we can help for these things, these industries that you see on your screen, but we work with many marketing agencies, property management companies, real estate, law firms, and people from the medical and healthcare industry. And so we've created menus of lists of the most common tasks that these types of clients request from us. All right. Now, we used to have these menus created by industries. We now switched them and created them by roles. Because, for example, a marketing agency could have the need for an administrative assistant, or a real estate company could need a marketer, right? So we've created these lists now based on the role of what you need the person to do. Now, the first thing that you should definitely know is that unicorns do not exist. That means that if you think that you're going to hire one person to do 7 different categories of tasks, you are dreaming. Come back to earth. People are not able to do necessarily everything that you can potentially have on your list, which means we're going to help you realize that you might probably need to hire potentially more than one assistant, usually, either 2 or 3, depending on what you need, because each assistant has a different type of expertise, right? But definitely, if you don't have the answer and you're not sure exactly how to do it, of course, we can help. That's part of the benefits of working with a company, in this case, through our agency program, where we're going to help you do most of these process in terms of not only helping you find the assistants, but also guiding you and consulting you in terms of what we believe are the real type of assistance that you need, at least initially, because you might have a list of 25 different things that you need to do, but really the key of the problem that might be stopping you from growing might actually just be 1 or 2 key areas, right? So we'll suggest that you start with hiring first that type of person and then somebody else. All right. Now, moving on to the next section for figuring out your budget. There's many different factors that influence the price of these assistants. In our company specifically, the lowest rate starts at $8 an hour for somebody full-time and can go up to 20, potentially a little bit more than $20 an hour. Now, there's many factors that determine what you're going to end up paying your assistant. And of course, the type of service is one of them, in terms of, the expertise specifically in which field that you need help with, how many years that person has in terms of experience, the time zone or where they're from, right? So somebody in the U.S., even if it's a virtual assistant in the U.S., is going to cost you a lot more naturally than in India or the Philippines or Latin America. And for example, Latin America is still on average a little more expensive than the Philippines and India, right? But many of those factors also count. The reason being, how the local currency compares to the US dollar, for example. So there's many factors to consider in terms of how much are you going to pay the assistant. I can tell you that you can go to India and pay people $2 an hour. In the Philippines, you might still people for $3 an hour if you're lucky, although that's a lot more hard to find today. And in Latin America, we could start from $4 or $5, right? But that we have in a separate webinar, so we won't go into the full pricing just yet. And then, of course, the amount of hours that you need them for. So our actual process in terms of pricing, we charge less if you hire full-time, and we charge $1 more if you're starting part-time because you're not actually working full-time. And that was just something that we decided to do. So moving on. And by the way, feel free to send questions if you have them. I will be reading them even if I won't have a chance to answer them immediately. So creating a good job description. So I can tell you that 98% probably, or maybe 99% of the clients that we work with don't ever have a job description or anything written down in terms of what they need. It's very few the people who do, and the ones who do, we are quite impressed. But you would be making yourself for sure a huge favor of writing down, everything that you're at least thinking in your head that you need, even if in the end it might be a little bit different from what you'll actually end up hiring. So in the past, we had a different version of our business model where we had a directory where people could actually post jobs on our platform. And then we would basically guide them in terms of how to do that best so that they could hire them on their own. Very long story short, we saw that there was a lot of issues with that model because people needed a lot of help figuring that out and creating good job descriptions and posts and including everything that they needed, which is why eventually our model moved into only working through the agency model where we do all of this. So if you can't figure out what's the best way to do it, we can help you if you were to decide to work with us. But if you're going to go with a different company, definitely if you write down on a Google Doc or Word, the ideal role, the name of the role, what's the assistant main title, let's say, going to be, what are going to be the main tasks, what skills ideally they should have, what type of experience, what you're thinking of paying them, and potentially if there's specific samples of the work that you're looking to get. In this case, let's say either something graphic or potentially if you're going to hire a content writer, the type of style that you're looking for. The more that you invest in researching and putting down in writing what you need, the better that the outcome is going to be in terms of hiring, whether you hire somebody on your own or through a company. Okay, how am I doing, Ale? Talking too fast or okay?
No, you're doing great.
All right. Sounds good then. Thank you.
Yeah.
Creating a work agreement. We absolutely have agreements for everybody who we work with, both from our clients as well as the assistants. We believe in having everything in writing, very clear, so that we avoid any potential problems with working with anybody. And I think that this is also very respectful, right? Because just from the fact that you're not going to hire somebody potentially in the US doesn't mean you should treat people without the respect and professionalism they deserve to have things in writing. And something that I definitely noticed when I was working with people in the Philippines, it was as easy as writing somebody a text message, hey, I want to hire you, you start tomorrow, I'll pay you whatever, and that's it. There wasn't any formality in terms of at least what the assistant was looking for. I from day one, always wanted people to sign some sort of written agreement to make sure that they understood what they were going to do, potentially how they were going to do it, how much I was going to pay them, how often I was going to pay them, and a lot of information. So creating an agreement is definitely useful. If you don't have one, you can definitely Google it. There's like lots of independent contractor agreement templates online. We, of course, created our own for hiring the assistants on our end. And then we separately, in this case with our clients, we have a service agreement for offering the services that we offer. Now, a key thing that you should definitely want to potentially think about also having, either as part of the original agreement or as a separate non-disclosure agreement, is basically that, a non-disclosure agreement, which is a document specifically created with the purpose of making sure that the person agrees that everything that you're going to share with them from that moment on that they didn't have any previous knowledge of is going to stay confidential, which means they're not going to go share it to your competitors, they're not going to share it with anybody else, and it's just another way to at least make it obvious that you're trying to make sure that they know that you're going to trust them and they're not going to do something bad, right? Now, in the reality of life, you can have all the documents in the world signed and it doesn't matter, right? Because people are people and humans sometimes make mistakes, whether on purpose or not on purpose, and nothing will protect you 100% from somebody potentially stealing information or doing something bad. But the more that you make it clear that you want to make sure that the relationship is professional, everything is in writing, and the expectations are well put in place, the better. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole potential of suing people from other countries, but I can tell you that it's complicated. Nobody wants to get into that problem. The idea of these agreements is just to make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody acts professionally, right? And the non-disclosure agreement protects you as a company from the assistant doing anything potentially bad with your information or your client's information, which is even the most important. We work with a lot of lawyers, with a lot of doctors, and they were initially very worried to work with somebody, out in Latin America, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala. They're like, how am I going to know these people aren't going to steal my information, right? Especially because there's a lot of confidential medical records, confidential social security numbers, or whatever that might be. But I can tell you that so far we haven't had a single issue with anybody. Well, first, because we completely vet absolutely everybody who is part of our community. We have these agreements in place, and then we physically do one-on-one onboardings with our assistants to make sure that everybody knows to act well. Okay. Now, I guess to wrap up kind of what I said, remember that one virtual assistant cannot do everything, but she can definitely, he or she can definitely take work off your plate, and that's the most important. Knowing that if you want to grow, you need help, and you can get help if you're willing to work with other people. And in the end, what I've always told my clients, it's all about trust. You need to learn to trust who you're going to work with, because the more trust that you have with them, the better they're going to trust you back, and the better the whole relationship is going to work. Okay? And again, going back to the limitations of each VA, everybody's going to have some type of limitation, and understanding what that limitation might be, it's important in the first part of the process to make sure that you don't give the assistant things that they can't work with or they can't do or be successful at. But most importantly, when you know that that person can't do something, it's a good time to think about, hey, I might need to hire somebody else. I might need to go and figure out if I can hire another assistant, or maybe I can't hire an assistant. I have to get somebody local in my physical store because of X, right? We have some clients that they need physically people in their office. So even though they think they needed an assistant virtually, sometimes it doesn't work out. And even though they tried it, they realize they can't, right? So obviously knowing those things in advance, or at least thinking about them, will be helpful. All right, give me a second. All right. Now, the better the relationship you have with your VA, the longer they're going to stay. So, and the longer they stay, the more benefit that you're going to have, both personally and of course as a business. And, I personally still tell everybody who we hire from day one, we want to make sure that you're going to be here and you're going to be happy, and you want to work with us to grow, to learn, and to stay here, I would say forever, but nothing is usually forever, but for as long as possible, because we truly want them to be with us. And to that note, in the other section we're going to talk about later on, you also need to make sure that you incentivize people to stay with you, right? So that's a whole other section. But yes, think about how to make those people that are working with you happy, and make them part of your team, and not making them feel like they're just somebody that you're outsourcing whatever tasks to. Because if they're not going to feel that close relationship with you, they're also not going to care to leave you, right? But if they feel part of your team, they're happy with what they're doing with you, they're likely to obviously want to be happy and continue to work with you. All right, step number 2. This is technically the third part of the conversation, but step 2 in terms of preparing to hire. So how to have a thriving interview. Okay, so we're not going to go into the steps right now as to how we do this. So later, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer. But here we're going to just tell you in general tips for how to be successful in an interview. So first step, be as clear as possible. That means not only speaking clearly and making sure that you understand, but really explain as much as possible the expectations that you have from the assistants, whether that's about how you're going to communicate with them, how you're going to ask them and request that they complete the task, or if you're going to talk about what goals they need to meet. We find sometimes that people hire assistants from us, and in the interview they were not so specific about what they wanted, and so the assistant wasn't so sure. And then once they start working, then they start assigning all these things, and then there's like this disconnect. Hey, like the client wasn't really that clear about what I was supposed to do, and in some cases the assistant might be like, hey, that was not what I was hired to do. Now they're asking me to do this. It's not that common, but the point is, the better that you're clear about what you're going to expect from them, the better, right? So nobody likes, let's say, surprises. Number two, talking about the job. So of course, in our specific case, we do all the work for our clients. So we already pre-vet the assistants, and we only present assistants that are specifically going to be good to our clients. But let's say that, of course, well, not of course, but let's say that you're doing this on your own, right? And you're vetting them yourself. So you're definitely going to make sure that if it's not clearly written in the job description what they're going to do, when you're actually interviewing them, you really should go through some examples, because sometimes the way that people write it on the job descriptions compared to what the actual work is going to be is different, right? So walking people through an example, let's say you're going to have somebody is going to help you work with Excel. Explaining, hey, every day you're going to go to Excel, you're going to open a document, you're going to go through 2, 3 tabs, and you're going to do X, Y, or Z, right? The more that you can make them visualize what they're going to do, the better. Then talking about the actual availability and schedule in terms of, when you're going to expect them to work, when they're going to, let's say, potentially take a break, how they're going to be managing their time within the day. Talking about the day-to-day tasks are important so that the assistants can visualize really what their life is going to look like. Because remember, work is a big part of everybody's life, and they want to make sure they know what they're going to do before they commit, to working with you. And of course, ask as many questions about the assistant's experience. Ask them to give you examples of their jobs or different specific tasks that you might need help with, so that you can also evaluate whether or not they're the right candidates. Okay. Now, virtual assistants, I'm going to say, in most cases, are legally seen as independent contractors that are charging you for their services, as opposed to a regular local employment-based agreement, right? So at least in the United States, that means people would need to send you an invoice and tell you how much you owe them, and then obviously you as the client should pay them, right? So discussing that information in advance, it's for sure very, very important. Everybody should know on both sides of the table how much they're going to pay, who's going to get paid, how much, how are they going to get paid, how often. All those details are super, super important, because the last thing you're going to want to do is invest all this time hiring the right person and then have issues when it comes to getting paid on the assistant side, or you not paying them potentially, what they were expecting. So, and there's usually questions like, how often should I pay my assistants? Should I pay them once a week, once every 2 weeks? Should I pay them after they work? Should I pay them before they work? That's kind of up to you. If you're hiring them directly from whatever source you want, if you're hiring them through an agency, then the agency is probably going to have their own standards. We specifically charge our clients a post payment every 2 weeks after the assistants do the work, and everything's calculated on a per hour basis. Nothing, in this case, it's per project, everything's per hour. But if you're going to hire somebody on your own, that's going to be totally up to you. So as long as you discuss it, you put it in writing, and it's definitely included in the agreement, then there shouldn't be any issues. All right. Some people do pay the assistants monthly, but you got to think about that people that are going to be working virtually for you likely have a need to have access to getting paid more often than once a month. So probably once a month might not work out for most assistants. So definitely something to consider. All right. So doing your research on the assistant, right? Now we're talking here about this whole interview. So you're going to be in front of them, let's say talking to them on Zoom, And getting back to being prepared, right? If you come to the interview and you're not really so sure who you're interviewing them and you didn't do your research about who you're going to talk to, it's not going to be that good, right? So having done some research at least in advance will be better so that when you do get to meet them and interview them, you can ask them for specific examples of something that they might be missing or something that you wish you'd seen. So looking, for example, when it comes to designers or writers, looking at their portfolio in advance is important. If your specific process or personality believes that it's important to get letters of recommendation, you can potentially ask for letters of recommendation or professional references. And then, of course, discussing, what it is that it means for the assistant in terms of the terms and conditions for, how fast they're going to respond to you, how fast you're going to expect for them to deliver work, how long you're going to be working for initially. Is it just a 10-day trial, 3-month trial, 1-year trial? Everything is up to you and the assistant. So in a way, you got to just negotiate that. And again, if you're working with an agency, you may or may not be able to negotiate everything you need depending on the company you work with. All right. And discussing your requirements. So, let's say that after the interview is completed and you've talked about all the different things related to the job, you're definitely then ready to sign the agreement, sign the NDA, and then potentially submit references. All right. I am starting to see here some chats. All right. I don't think there's any questions just yet. All right.
No questions right now.
Okay, perfect. All right. Now, red flags in interviews. This is a key part of this presentation, so definitely please pay some attention. We see red flags in many different areas of our recruitment process, both when assistants are coming in to want to work with us, as well as clients who want to work with us that also give us some red flags. So we're going to talk about specifically here some red flags for the interview. All right. So some red flags to consider. When you're looking at the assistant's background in terms of their work history, if something looks a little suspicious, that's something to think about. Potentially an inconsistent career path. Now, let me just say that there's a lot of mothers in our community, and not working for a year or two is definitely common if they don't have, work experience that's consistent. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as it can simply be explained, hey, I didn't work for 2 years because of this or that. Or hey, maybe they wanted to go travel for a year. I don't think there's anything wrong with people not having a consistent career path as long as there's a reason and as long as they are very truthful about what happened in that past, right? But definitely, if you see that there's any inconsistency, asking about it is important, okay? Other red flags is unable to explain previous work in terms of, details about the work or why they were let go or why they chose to leave. If you start asking them questions and they're like not sure how to answer, that's probably a red flag. Leaving jobs due to disagreements, thinking about what those disagreements might be are definitely important things to consider as a red flag. Job hopping, which is moving around different jobs too often, is usually not a good sign, of course, of people going to be reliable for the long term, right? Which is, again, part of this main focus of today's conversation. And again, gaps in employment, which is sort of connected to the inconsistent career path potentially, okay? Now, being late, that is something that we absolutely do not accept in our community. Now, there's a difference between being late and being flexible. We are a very flexible company. People come in and start work pretty much whenever they want because we personally allow it. But once they know what time they're officially starting, they should be on time, whether that's meetings or starting their work or whatever it is, right? So that's a red flag. Now, how are you going to know that during the interview? Well, the only way to know is to ask, right? Now, will people tell you the truth? Hard to tell, but discussing any potential issues with tardiness is a thing. Swearing, that's not that common. People don't usually swear. They're professionals. But if you see obviously that somebody's swearing in the interview or not speaking very well, it's probably not a good sign. Overqualified. Overqualified could be a red flag and could be not. Many of our clients do sometimes think that our candidates are overqualified because they are. We have a lot of great people that are very overqualified. And they may have master's degrees, PhDs, and they're applying for like an administrative job. And let me tell you that the reason they're applying is because that is still for them a good job to potentially have rather than having no job, because in many of their countries, they don't have opportunities to do what they are prepared and qualified to do. So yes, maybe in some cases you can think somebody's too qualified and they're not going to get bored doing my job, so it's not a good idea to hire them. And in some cases that's true, but in some cases it's not. We actually have a PhD candidate. So, he has a doctoral degree. He started working at the lowest rate, full time, doing sort of admin work, and now he's getting paid, definitely more because he proved himself that he could work in the job that he was, assigned to work. But I think obviously he's probably still overqualified, for some of the tasks. But the point is, overqualified doesn't always mean it's bad, right? It depends on the task and what the overqualification might be. If the assistants are not asking you questions in the interview, that's usually a red flag. That means they're not either that interested or they didn't want to learn more about you, and that's not good. Any errors on the resume or when they're writing, any potentially bad writing could be a problem, or gossiping about former employers. All right, now I'm going to try to do this a little faster because we're kind of running out of time. So not running out of time, we got plenty of time, but I want to have time for questions. All right, so any questions so far? I don't think so, right?
No.
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 All right.
Now, no.
Perfect. So now we're going to go into step 3. Onboarding your virtual assistant. Now, let's state the obvious. Let's first know that if you're already onboarding UVA, let's assume you already did the rest of the steps, which means, you already interviewed them, you already chose who you want to hire, you already sent them an agreement, they signed it, you signed it. Assuming all that did happen, then of course it's time to start onboarding them into your team, welcoming them into your company, and making them part of your now day-to-day work. So one of the most important things that I believe is important that you do once you're going to onboard them, even though we personally, when we're doing the recruitment for our assistants, for our clients, we always ask about the companies that we're working with because we think it's very important that the assistants know where they're going to work. It's usually a pretty short introduction, right? So we don't go into too many of the details about each company because then we wouldn't have time to make long descriptions about every company and client we work with. But once you're going to onboard them, I think it's super important that you spend definitely as much time as you think it's needed to explain who your business is, how long it's been in business, how did the business potentially start, a really good background about who your company is, who your clients are, who your ideal clients are, and who are not. Basically, you need to make sure that they know who they're going to be working with, right? And then, of course, sharing with them challenges that you're facing today, which is probably one of the reasons you're hiring them, right? You need help in some part of your business. And also sharing with them any strategies that you have, if you have any, in terms of things that you think that you should be doing, that you can, in this case now, bounce ideas with them potentially, or you might already know exactly what you need and you're going to just tell them, what you want them to do. But it's always an opportunity to let also the assistants give you some ideas of what they think, whether some of your strategies are great ideas or maybe there's better ways to do something. So having that introduction is a really good way to get to know the assistants too, and see also how much initiative they have, which is a big important part of a successful assistant. All right. And training your virtual professional. This is definitely another key piece of the puzzle to this long-term relationship. If you just hire somebody and you went everything that I spoke to so far, but you don't train your assistant, you're not going to have a long-term relationship. Okay, or at least you're probably not going to. Training the assistants, just like training anybody that you have in your company physically in the United States, in this case, let's say, and physically in the office or not, you just have to know that you need to train them. And yes, I can tell you that most clients get that, right? Nobody comes out of the box ready to work. We're not machines, we're people. But some clients do think that they're just going to hire somebody that's potentially completely trained and everything to do with their company. Now, yes, our assistants have skills, have training, have experience. They know how to do different things based on what you're looking for, but that doesn't mean they know how to work with you and your processes and your team and your company. So definitely training them is obviously a very important part, right? And so we're going to talk about some of those things. So the introduction to the duties and tasks that the VA is going to be responsible for, at the very least, includes a list of those tasks, definitely in some type of written form, including the hours that they're going to be doing per week. Many of these things you probably already discussed initially, but confirming them in the initial training is a good idea to just make sure everybody really does know what they're going to be expected to be doing. Okay. And if there's any specific schedule, of course, mentioning, hey, I'm expecting you to be working from this time to that time. And because this is remote work and you're never going to physically see anybody walking through your door, it's so important that when are people going to start. So I'll tell you that for us, initially, I had asked everybody who worked in our teams to say hi to me every morning and say, hey, good morning, I'm starting to work. And everybody wrote to me. Eventually, we hired too many people and I was getting too many messages directly. So we kind of changed the strategy, and people still check in and say good morning, but in a general team or company group, whether that's Slack, if you use Slack, or Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever your instant messaging tool is. Definitely that's a good way to keep track of who's starting their job and when they're taking a break, or when they're finishing, right? So that's probably a good idea. Now, training your VA. This section is communication methods. Now, when we do the onboarding after a client signs an agreement, we do a 45-minute onboarding Zoom call with our client, the assistant, and somebody from our customer success team. And we do go over many of these things that I'm mentioning here, but obviously very briefly. The whole thing is 45 minutes and we got to cover a lot of things. So you as a client having your separate training with your assistant, let's say in this case, how do you communicate through Slack? What are the different channels on Slack? Or how do you use Telegram? Or what are the expected ways to communicate through email? Or potentially, when should you not communicate through email and instead you should be creating tasks on your project management system? So defining all of those communication methods is very important. We still internally sometimes struggle because it's so easy to just chat on Telegram, which is like Slack, as opposed to going into the project management system and creating tasks, right? So figuring out how you feel is the best way to communicate with your team is very important that you set that up in advance. If you're going to have people making calls through the phone, in this case, a voice over IP phone or VoIP, definitely going through the testing of making sure that they know how to do it, that they can log in, that when they call, you can actually hear them, and doing some test calls is definitely very important. Now, tools. Tools is a big thing. We can't cover all the different types of specific tools because we work with so many different clients, over 400 at this point, and they come from all different industries, and each industry has their own specific software. So we're going to just talk about some categories, right? For example, when it comes to managing projects or tasks, a project management system is the most essential. And there's many, many free tools. We, in fact, have a page where we can show all the tools, some free, some paid, that you can use. But keeping track of your tasks, not by email, is very important. And I can tell you that many clients have never used a project management system, and that's okay. You maybe never had to, and you were either very disorganized and have a mess and still have a mess, or you may be super organized and don't use a project management system and you're amazing. But let's say that on average, people have things all over their head or all over their email, and they don't have a central place where they keep track of tasks. Some people use Google Sheets, which is like at the very least better than email, but using an actual project management software that lets you assign users to a task, keep due dates, keep comments, add documents, images. Actually using a proper project management system is very, very important. But for example, lawyers, they specifically manage cases, right, with their clients. So they have what's called a case management system. So they don't really have, let's say, projects, but they have cases. So it's very similar in the idea, but the software itself is different, right? And then you got to consider communication tools like we just mentioned, whether that's email or instant messaging or phones. Design software, if you're hiring somebody for design, whether that's, for example, things that are common today like Canva, which are web-based design systems, or if you need them and expect them to have, for example, the Adobe suite, so that they have all these Photoshop, Illustrator, or whatever you need for them to design. In some cases, if you already have specific software, you might be paying for the software. But if the assistant themselves is already a professional in that field, usually you can expect them to have the software themselves, right? And then when it comes to, for example, developing marketing strategies and marketing campaigns, there's hundreds of different software. We ourselves can't keep up with the list of things we use. So there's a lot of different software. But if you don't know all the different tools that you might need, definitely reach out to us. We're always happy to geek out, or at least I am. I think Alejandra too. I've shown her everything I know, and now she's actually an expert more than me, and I'm very happy to say that because now she gets to spend a lot of the time testing software, checking out if it's good, and learning how to use it, and it's no longer me. And I'm proud to say that, even though I'm jealous, because I love to learn about all these software, and the truth is I'm a bit jealous because now I don't know how to use the systems, and now I just need to rely on her to teach me and teach others for how to do things. But that's great, right? Because then she can do it and I don't have to do it. And that's kind of the goal. And then, of course, there's web development software and multiple types of CRMs, which will be for a different conversation. Training your VA for how to use the software, tools, and processes. If you already have software that the assistant knows how to use, then it's kind of obvious. You don't need to teach him anything. Like a graphic designer is going to know how to use Photoshop already, potentially, right? But if you're training them, for example, how to do cold calling or how to do cold email marketing or whatever your operating procedures are, you definitely need to teach your assistants how to use that, right? And there's many ways to do it, whether that's live training one-on-one, which is what we did initially, where we had literally Zoom calls and I would teach, in this case, for example, Alejandra, how to do many of the things we know how to do. And then eventually I said, well, I'm going to teach you once, we're going to record it, and then whenever we're going to hire somebody in your team, you're going to give them the video so they can watch it. And then you start creating a bunch of videos for training the next assistants, right? And then those assistants can then see those videos, and then potentially then you start to create what are called SOPs, standard operating procedures, which is mostly just a document of really detailed instructions for how you do any type of process, whether it's marketing, sales, customer support, whatever the process is. Writing it down in a lot of detail would make it much easier to train new assistants. Now, I can tell you that we're internally investing a lot of time writing SOPs. I just saw one of my sales SOPs is like 60 pages. I was like, wow. I mean, literally, like, I feel like this big company now that has this huge sales manual. Like, we're not printing it, but like old school, imagine somebody's coming to the office and you say, welcome, today's your first day. Here's this Bible of tons of pages that you need to read, right? Like, yeah, we have them today. We have lots of them, but we're probably still missing like 70% of them because creating those documents take a long time, but they've been a key part of growing our team because everything is written down, at least in most of the essential things we do, and then it's much easier to train new people as they come in. All right. So if you don't have any of them, don't worry. We didn't have anything. We had zero. So the first thing you do is you train live one-on-one, then you record those things, and then those things get recorded. And once they're recorded, then you can have somebody else go back, watch the video, and convert that video into a written process, right? And you can do it a little bit at a time. Never expect to do or have everything before you hire someone. It's just not going to ever happen, right? So you can just do it as you're growing. Boundaries. Try to limit communication to normal business hours because as much as possible, it is important that everybody has also their private life, and this should be mutually respected. Now, there's definitely different, let's say, rules that every company has in terms of how that happens. And I'm going to tell you what kind of our rule is internally. We definitely do not expect people to work or answer after their business hours are done, but we did make it possible that anybody can send a message to anybody at any time, just if it's easier for them to send a message because it's important. But they know, the team knows that they're not expected to reply, and the person who's sending it potentially after hours, they should definitely not expect that person to reply. Now, if that person happens to be up and they want to reply, they're welcome to, but they're definitely not expected to, right? Because I definitely think that it is important to have our private life. It is harder and harder to do, but I know that Alejandra, when she's done, and I'm happy she's not looking at this thing because she's got to take a rest because she works a lot while she's working. All right. And remember, you gotta have patience. Things take time. People need some, time to get to learn what they need to do. So you gotta definitely have patience, and that's obviously normal. Some people tell me, how much does it take to train or onboard your assistant? The answer, it's up to you. There's clients that have amazingly structured training systems and programs and SOPs, and within 2 weeks, the person is literally up and running. We take more of our time. It can take 4 to 6 weeks at the least to potentially 3 months. It just depends on the role. All right, how are we doing on time? I think we just
I think we
50
have
minutes.
10 minutes. We have a question before we move on.
Sure,
Jaime.
let's go.
Yeah, we have it here in the chat. It says
from Noé Moreno. Okay.
Yes. So
are all the aides prepared? Yeah, with a laptop or PC. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for telling me. I see it here. Yeah. What are all VAs? Are all VAs prepared with a laptop or PC, or does the business owner provide technology? Great question. If you hire them through a company, everybody that works with us has already a PC or a Mac. Most people probably have a Windows PC. Some people have Apple, computers, but definitely everybody already has a computer. Otherwise, they can't work through our company. But when it comes to the actual technology, let's say whether it's accessories, let's say like a Bluetooth or a microphone or an extra screen, some assistants already have the screen, some don't. It's kind of up to you as a client if you'd wanted to invest in your assistant to have a second screen. And we've had many clients do that where they're like, hey, I'll pay for the screen. They just tell me how much it is, and they usually, the assistant buys it locally. They give you the receipt, we charge you, and we just pay them. So you don't have to ship it to them. But when it comes to technology like software, depending on the software, most software, it's expected that you as the client provides it. I hope that answers the question. Right, I'm not sure where I went. All right. Okay, so let's move on to step 4, work relationship. Okay, let me see. So now, this is kind of the part that, again, when it comes to getting to having a long-term relationship, getting to meet and getting to know your assistants is super, super important. I'm happy and proud to say that we finally were able to meet in person last October. 4 people from our team came from Argentina, Guatemala, and Mexico, and we met finally face to face and hugged and had great time together. But in most cases, you're not going to be able to do that. So that means that you're going to have to spend some time thinking of creative ways to create virtual social spaces. For example, we have something called Happy Jueves, where we basically meet once a month on Zoom and just have social fun activities that have nothing to do with work, right? But in general, just getting to know your assistants on a more personal, still professional level, it's important. Ask about their families, ask about their goals, their personal preferences. Really, just get them to know as people, just like anybody that you would meet not in person. Now, in terms of the work relationship, for it to be successful, being clear is super important. Too much information is better than too little. Being super clear in your explanations and expectations is important. Setting clear deadlines and giving clear instructions on what to expect is key. Because if you make it very clear what you're expecting and it doesn't get done, then you have an excuse to say, hey, everything was pretty well explained. But if you just are not that detailed and you're not really telling people exactly what you're expecting, and then you get mad, you can't really be mad if they didn't do something on time if you weren't clear, right? So the more clear you are, the better. In fact, we ourselves internally, we put everything in writing. We are very clear so that we make sure that there's not any potential gaps of where there's going to be a lack of information, right? And this next one is actually quite important. We've had some clients who we've had issues with that are not open to questions and feedback from the assistants. They want to kind of treat the assistants like machines. Like I just tell you what to do and you do it, and that's it. I don't want to talk to you, and that doesn't work. All right, like you need to literally. It might not be every day or every minute of every hour, but making sure that the assistants know that you have specific time where you can be reached, to be asked questions, to be provided more training, to make sure that people know what they're doing, and potentially be open to feedback is, I think, one of the key success strategies for really making a long-term relationship. And I don't know, maybe Alec could just comment about that, even though that's not part of the presentation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think being part of a team, and especially if you're a manager, a director, a CEO, is very, very important to ask for feedback as well. Maybe if your VA is not telling you anything, it's good to have a meeting, a one-on-one meeting sometimes, and ask them how they feel, if they feel like we can start doing something different, especially when you are noticing that someone is not performing maybe as you expected. Definitely, it's good to know if you can help them or any feedback that could help. And of course, you need to feel entitled to give them feedback as well and tell them what they can do better, and also tell them what they are doing great. I think that's something that you need to do. Try to tell your assistant that when they are doing something good, make them feel that way, so they are going to be very, very happy and they will be motivated and etc. So yeah, I think this part is huge. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that for the most part, I definitely tell people when they do great, and I try to tell them often, and I also tell them when they don't do it good because they need to improve, but that's normal, right? But definitely not forgetting to give them praises when they're doing things good are definitely a key part of it. So thank you for that, Ale. All right. And again, have patience. Okay, creating SOPs. So we mentioned this a little bit before. SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure, and it's a fancy way to say, you need to write down the instructions for how everything that you need to be done at your company is done. SOPs typically are written, but they don't have to be. They could be a video. Potentially, it could be a combination of videos and images and writing. In fact, our company right now is in the process of doing both as a minimum or as a standard. All of our SOPs are written Google Docs, which include screenshots of different parts of how we do the job. But now we're going to actually upload and recreate this SOPs that are currently like a Google Doc into a specifically, let's call it like a training program. Think about it like an online web platform where you can upload step-by-step processes. So as opposed to just one really long Google Doc, the idea of this is we don't want just those SOPs to live in a library forever inside your Google Docs that nobody looks at. The idea is that, let's say that I'm going to hire somebody new for our marketing team, right? And we need to teach them about how to do email marketing. So we're going to have now a platform that I'm going to be able to assign this new virtual assistant that's part of our company to go through that, let's call it training process of that SOP. But instead of just expecting them to just read the Google Doc, this thing is going to ask them to, of course, read it, but with pieces at a time, and they're going to have to be able to click next to move on to the next section, as opposed to scrolling down on a Google Doc. And then we can put little quizzes in the middle of it to make sure that they actually understood what they're learning. And then after the end of the little quizzes, you can have them take, let's say, a big final quiz, right? So it's sort of like a training platform, but specifically in this case for SOPs. And we can tell you more about it later if you're interested, because it's really, really cool. We haven't finished it, but we're definitely in the process. There's too many SOPs and too many steps, but we have a great software to do it all. Now, challenge and empower. You got to start with small tasks and work your way up to more complex projects. And there's here 5 levels of delegation, right? So we're going to kind of explain them to you. Level 1 at the very lowest is you got to do as I tell you, right? And that's it. Level 2, research and report to me. That means you're already giving the assistant, let's say, some freedom to go do some research and go do things without you, let's say, right behind their back. The level 3 is researching and recommending. So not just researching and reporting, but then thinking about, okay, not only did you research it, but what do you think? You tell me. And that's kind of what I ask very much of Alejandra, a lot of researching and recommendations. And we're definitely now getting to level 4 where, you let them decide and inform, right? So I'm like, great. So I tell you what I need. You need to report it. Then you need to tell me what you think in terms of what's the best recommendation that we should go. And then, yeah, why don't you decide, right? So there's things that maybe now you're going to be too busy and you don't want to even think about what to decide. So, right, the more and more um, complex the relationship is and the task potentially is, the higher you're going to be in these levels. And of course, this is going to take time. But the point is here is about empowering the assistant to become independent, for you to trust them, for them to trust you, and for them to actually be helpful to you, right? So I think that this is very good. And let's say level 5, act independently. And I definitely think that with Alejandra as my example here, we're definitely at level 5. She is able to, just hear an idea from me, and I tell her, hey, we need to do this and that. And she does the whole thing. Of course, now she also has a team. And then I basically just say, yes, I approve or I don't approve. I don't even have to go through all the details, right? Which is great because she acts independently with the rest of the team. So I think it's great. Set short and long-term goals. So this is something kind of new that we're asking our clients to do to help them out as well as internally when we're hiring new people to make sure that they have really realistic goals for the short term. That could be the first 30 to 60 or 90 days. And then for more long-term goals, which is going to be, of course, whatever that might mean to you, whether that's a year or 2 years. In terms of the expectations for the quality, the date and time, we think about long-term or in general, whether it's short-term or long-term by quarters. So we try to say, hey, we expect this by quarter 1, which is, let's say right now as part of 2022, and then maybe other things for a little later. And that's kind of up to you. Next step is giving constructive feedback. We already kind of spoke about that. When people are doing things that are good, you should tell them. And when they need to improve it, you should also tell them, but you should be kind about how to tell it. It should be constructive feedback. It should not be, you are horrible at your job and I'm going to fire you if you don't do it better, which, believe it or not, we have quite a few handful of clients that do not give constructive feedback. They treat people really bad. And guess what? Of course, the assistants eventually quit. In one case, we've had to let a client go because of them not being very respectful. And next step for the work relationship, you got to reward excellent performance, right? When you see that people are doing great, say thank you. Let them know that their work is very valued. And then another way to show that, other than saying it, is providing bonuses or incentives, whether that's a one-time bonus or a weekly or monthly bonus, or simply making them stand out and mentioning them in a potentially, team meeting. I think that's very, very important so that people feel that their work is being rewarded. And other things you can do is give perks. We just, I think last quarter or within the last 4 or 5 months, we redefined our entire perks structure, which includes, pay time off, subscriptions to, for example, things like Netflix. We're doing other perks like buying, tables and chairs and extra screens or things for the office based on their tenure, based on how long they've been working with us. And, that's kind of up to everybody. Everybody can decide how to do that. And of course, to respect what people are doing, you should definitely always pay on time. And this is something that we are very, very, very strict about. We always pay on time. Unfortunately, sometimes our assistants don't get the money when they are expecting it, but that's unfortunately not up to us. We use payment platforms that sometimes, take a little longer, but we always pay on time because I think that's a way to show respect to who's working with you. Okay? And I think this is the last part, so I should be done shortly, even though we still have, about 25 minutes. So step number 5, growing your business. This is, of course, if we're thinking, this long-term relationship with the assistant is working, how can I continue to grow that relationship and grow the business along with it? So the first thing that you should think about is that training never ends because your company is constantly changing. And then the role of your assistant is probably constantly changing too. This is very true in our company. It's very true with our clients. It's just like work never ends. There's just always work to do, right? And I'm sure everybody can probably relate. There's always things to do. Things are constantly changing, usually for the best, right? You're trying to adapt your business model, trying to adapt to people's feedback and comments and how to do things better or more efficiently. So you got to keep that in mind. And for example, when it comes to the SOPs and training that we do, that means we're constantly updating these SOPs. We're constantly changing the videos because things change, so we need to change them. Specifically in our marketing department, to use it as an example, we have a lot of PDFs and materials that we use for marketing purposes that are graphically designed. And as we continue to change information and terms and conditions or whatever information we change in the business model, they got to go back and change it everywhere, right? And that takes, of course, time. Now, the next thing is about growth opportunities, right? As your VAs become experts, they can teach and train other VAs to help you grow your team. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier, right? You should think about that if you're going to have this assistant for the long term, and assuming that they're going to be, working well, everything that you're investing with them, you literally are investing in them, and they're investing with you, because that means that the better that they are at their job, the better you can trust them to train other people, right? And then you, of course, can promote your VAs to take on bigger roles, bigger responsibilities, and ideally that comes, with more respect in terms of not just between you and them, but them and the rest of the team, right? In terms of who they are. In terms of managing your VAs, so as we have more and more people, whether you like it or not, this is where, let's call it, middle management comes in, right? As soon as you have quite a few people, you're going to have people to manage people, because as much as everybody's going to try to do their job well on their own, the reality is that we're all humans, and usually you always need someone to help manage and ensure things get done on time, right? So that means usually after X amount of virtual assistants, you're likely going to need to hire a virtual assistant to manage your virtual assistants. And I can tell you a short story that one of our clients very smartly decided that the first assistant she was going to hire was going to be a manager. She was not going to have this person actually do anything of the tasks she needed help with. Very smartly, she hired somebody who was going to become like the office manager and had to have experience with human resources. And that person, in a way, sort of immediately replaced the client's needs to be in charge of hiring. He hired this assistant, and then this assistant was in charge of hiring the rest of the assistants. So that's also one way to do it, right? And then let your senior VAs take management roles. We kind of already mentioned it. So business is all about relationships. I guess that is one way to summarize it best. You need to build them. How you build them determines how well you're going to build your business, right? And I think, as I kept talking about these long-term relationships, remember that virtual assistants and virtual professionals are people. They are not machines. They are not software. You need to treat them with respect, with patience, and like any other human that you treat, if you treat them right, they're going to give you the fruit of your well treatment and your good treatment to help you with the company. All right. Now, be prepared that before you hire, while interviewing, onboarding, and taking the right precautions during your work relationships will ensure you find someone who is ideal for your company that will stay for the long run. Okay. So this kind of summarizes everything we spoke about, which we did differently than other webinars. Here we spoke about the before, the during, and the after, right? So when you're going to think about hiring a virtual assistant, you really truly need to think about all of these concepts before you start the process, because if you only think about the beginning, or you only think about the later, or you only think about the during, it may not work out to be a long-term relationship. So hopefully that sinks in. So now we're going to talk a bit about us. I think I'm doing pretty good on time. Virtual Latinos. So we are experts in helping clients around the world to find and hire amazing virtual professionals that will be part of your team for the long run. And that's a very key thing to say, because if you're going to end up talking to our team, you're going to see that we're going to ask you if you're looking for something like project-based or short-term, or you're actually looking to build a team, right? Because if you're looking for just affordable help, please don't come to us. Just if that's the only reason that you want to hire someone, you can go to Upwork, you can go to Fiverr. There's tons of sites to hire freelancers. We are only focused on people who want to build their teams for the long run, who want to hire professionals and want to make them part of their family, right? So with us, with Virtual Latinos, you're not alone. We really do help you in every step of the hiring process. Many of the things that we covered here today, we'll actually do for you. So that's kind of the cool thing about working with us. Many of these things you don't have to do. You might need to do some of them, of course, because only you know your business, but we really have created a lot of structure and a lot of methods for how to interview you as a client. And when we mean interview, we really mean interview. Like we really are going to spend a while talking to you to really understand what you need. And that's a step that happens after you have an initial, like, let's call it introductory or quick call to learn about us. If you are serious about hiring, we're going to dedicate the time to get to know you and your business to make sure that we are going to find, what you're looking for. So Virtual Latinos helps, of course, companies save time and money in the recruitment process, and we can help you again during the entire process. We have top hand-picked professionals. We hire about 2% of all the people that initially apply to work with us, and we accept about 5%. Everybody up to today is fully bilingual in at least, of course, English, and the second language being the most common, Spanish, but now we have also some people that speak Portuguese because they're from Brazil. Everybody's usually working on the North American, let's say, time zone, or really just the American time zone, right? They're not in the Philippines, they're not in India, so they wake up and go to bed at around the same time as you. Many of the people that we have are experienced professionals. About 95% of the people we have at least a college degree. That may not mean that they have experience, but at least they went through college. But at the very minimum, we try to get people that have at least 1 or 2 years of work experience. And of course, many of them have a lot more. So we as a company, we help you find them, vet them, interview them, and we go through the whole process. And then we provide basically support. Once you hire them, you get to manage them directly, but we provide you support. We have a whole customer success team that is currently made up of, I think, 6 people. So we have a whole team of full-time people to help you basically through each step of the way. So that's kind of, the end of the webinar. So I hope that was a lot of good information. So ready to answer any more questions.
Perfect, Jaime. Thank you so much. We already have a question from Tete. So you can open the Q&A section and you will start seeing the questions there.
Okay, perfect. So Tete, first of all, Tete is one of our clients. We love him. He has a nonprofit. He helps orphans in Tijuana. I'm not sure, where is the question? Is it higher up? Can you help me, Ale? Maybe you read it out to me.
Yeah, if you check the Q&A, it says in the tab of open, it says, what roles with a virtual professional's job have you seen that keep them long-term inspired? Content creation, project creation, commission opportunities, etc.
Okay, there you go. Okay, maybe just type it again so it goes at the bottom, Ale, because I can't find it right now. So, okay, but what types of long-term relationships, what types of roles tend to be long-term? That's a great question today. I don't really know if I have the immediate answer to tell you what the answer is, because I don't think that it's necessarily one specific role. It's really about the match between, the client and the assistant in terms of, what the company represents, and if that aligns to that person's specific personal goals. A lot of people love working with their clients because of the industries that they're in. Some of them do take the job sometimes, out of course, the need to have a job, not necessarily loving what the company does. So I think that the more fit there is between the personality and the aspirations of that person, regardless of the role, the better. We've had clients who have, for example, businesses in the alternative healing industries, that are maybe, something that we have actually people that are very into those types of, let's say, medical practices that are not the most common ones. And they love, and the relationship between the clients and the assistants are so strong because the client and the assistant really align at a personal level, right? In terms of who they are as people. So I think that's maybe the right way to answer it, right? Now, will you always be able to know who people are in a 30-minute interview before you hire them? Probably not. But that's why it's very important to ask them these personal questions in terms of outside of work, what makes you happy? And I actually have asked this to my assistants, I know that you're here because you need a job, but like in your ideal world, where would you work? What would make you happy for the rest of your life? Are you going to be happy working as an assistant, let's say in marketing in this case, or customer support? Or would you want to be, I don't know, saving the world, creating a cancer treatment? I don't know, because we have, for example, people who are medical doctors. So the point is, yeah, I think it really depends on that specific person, what it is that they're doing in their life and what they're looking for. So hopefully that answers sort of the question. Any other questions?
Perfect. Yeah, we have a comment from Bridget Barrett. You are so professional and organized, and I love my virtual professional, Isabel. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. That's awesome. I'm really, really happy to hear that. I really love that comment because I personally am a very organized guy. And a lot of the things that we do in Virtual Latinos, I guess, is just out of my own personality of being kind of crazy organized. And we're trying to make that be part of what our assistants are doing. So thank you so much.
Perfect. We have another question here from Julie Kern. What is your vetting process to ensure they are trustworthy?
Great question, Julie. Hi, thanks for joining us. So this is definitely a thing that some people have asked us in the past, especially lawyers. One of the most common questions from people who are worried about, how can I really trust these people, is actually like if we do background checks or not. And let me first answer myself that question. We do not do background checks. There are companies that do background checks in Latin America or around the world. We don't believe that the background check is the best way to necessarily know whether they're trustworthy or not. So I am going to answer your question. The way that we know whether they're trustworthy or not, or at least from our experience so far, is we've made the vetting process very tedious, let's call it. It's not complicated, but it's very time consuming, and it asks people to jump through a lot of hoops. Many people don't qualify in many cases because their English level is not good enough, but many people just don't qualify and they don't complete the process because it's just so much work. So kind of our thinking is if people are going to invest their many hours of their time to go through our process, which requires them to write a lot of things, to take English tests, to take a lot of their time to read and to do things the way that we ask them, we first are going to hope that they're going to be very detail oriented. That's one of the key things. But also, ideally, there are people who are going to be, trustworthy because they're serious about working with us and through a company like us who's highly vetting who they are in terms of their personality. But yes, there's no, of course, like I said, 100% way to know whether people are trustworthy or not, except giving them an opportunity to work with you and finding that out. Now, like we did mention in the webinar, things that we do put in place that are important. Our agreements already have an NDA clause on the regular agreement. But we separately now, about a month or 2 months ago, we're now requiring every assistant to separately sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is a separate document. And that basically ensures that they really know that there's this whole separate document that they need to be serious about protecting both the client's information and their clients' clients as well as ours. So that's kind of one way to mitigate that. And I think that answered the question. Now, the next one is, do you have VAs who have experience with QuickBooks? Great question. The answer is both yes and no. We have a few potentially that might know how to use QuickBooks if they worked with other clients from us who are in the US, which is all of our clients. Now, we have a lot of people that know how to do bookkeeping without necessarily knowing how to use QuickBooks, right? Because you don't have to be an accountant to do bookkeeping. Bookkeeping is a lot less complicated than an accounting job. So yes, we actually have a lot of clients who hire assistants to do bookkeeping within QuickBooks Online. But it doesn't mean that they know how to do it. That means they know how to do bookkeeping and the whole idea of how to categorize expenses and create reports. But in many cases, our clients are going to have to give them an introduction to QuickBooks themselves or have them, watch training videos from QuickBooks. Great. Thanks, Julie. I'm glad that was helpful. All right. Ernesto is asking, what is the typical repayment cycle of VAs, at least statistically, if you have some figures? That is a great question. We actually are in the process of working that out. So we did not have inside our CRM system the dates of when people started and when they were finishing it. So we're just now added them, what, like a month ago maybe, Ale? We inputted every single agreement into our system so that we can calculate that. So I actually want to know that statistic as well, at least for what it is today. I can tell you that back last summer, we did hire a consultant to give us some statistics, at least of what are the likelihood of people staying for the long term, based on the figures at that time. And we basically realized that within the first 30 days, if somebody stays for 30 days, it's very likely that they're going to stay for 90 days. Okay. And the key time is that if they stay for us for at least 90 days, it's like 95% probability that they're going to stay for a year. So basically hitting the first 90 days of working with the assistants is kind of the key to ensure that they'll work with us for at least a year. So hopefully that answers sort of that question. Next question. One more statistical. What is the ratio of VAs between females and males? It's kind of exactly 50-50, right, Ale? We might have a little more women, but
yeah, we have a little bit more, but it's pretty, 50-50 actually.
Yeah, it's like 51 or 52-48. It's pretty close. In
Yeah.
terms of the age brackets, that's a great question. I'm going to say the great majority of them are going to be somewhere between like 25 and probably 40, right, Ale? Like
Yeah,
80% of them?
yes, 80% of them will be between, I will say 25 to 35.
Yeah.
But we have VAs, older VAs, and also younger VAs that are,
18-year-olds.
that are just, like they already have working experiences, but they are still studying or going to the university and stuff like that. So yeah, we have like a variety of VAs, but mostly will be after 25 years to 35. Yeah.
Yeah, but we also don't discriminate on age, and we've had a lot of people that have been faithful to us, people that are older, let's say 50 or 60, that are working with us, and they're like, thank God that you guys are giving us an opportunity, because not many people wanted to hire them, and as long as they can do their job and they speak English, we're happy to have them. And then Raul is asking, can we get native English VAs? Great question. That is like the golden question, because we've had so many questions about this internally. What should be the answer to that? The official answer is no. We don't have people that have native English skills. And the reason I say that is because officially everybody is from Latin America. Most of them have never worked in the US or have been born in the US. But the unofficial answer and the reality of the practicality is that we have very few people that, yes, have native English skills, only because it's people that happen to have been born in the US or raised in the US, and then they moved back to Latin America. But there are very few in our community. The reason I'm saying this is because if you're expecting to hire people from our community that have native English accents, the answer is no, we don't have them. Now, might we send our clients people that have above average speaking skills? Yes. But will they be native? No. I am not a native English speaker myself. I've been here for many years in California, and I still have an accent, right? And it doesn't matter because I was just not born here. So yeah, most of our people are going to speak either better than me or worse than me. I have people on my team that speak better than me, and they were never living in the US. So yeah, that's kind of the answer. Great question. How come you're not? She's got the virtual assistants. She's got both.
Yeah, I've got my sweater and also my t-shirt, but here I'm in Argentina actually, so it's pretty cold here, so I'm using my awesome sweater that it was a gift when we meet with Jaime last year in our San Diego summit. So
Yes.
yeah, awesome.
Thank you, Ernesto, and thank you, Julie, for my English. I'm glad that it's good. I definitely get bothered by my brothers who are younger than me, who when they came just happened to have a better accent. But hey, it is what it is. But thank you. I do think that my English at least is good. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy for everybody who attended. I really hope that this was useful. Please remember that if you're already working with us, I'm always here, happy to help. You can always schedule time with me at no cost to talk about your business and how you can potentially grow it if you hire more people from us, or if you just want to talk about software and geek out with me about technology. I'm happy to help you. That is kind of my passion. If I could do something every day, even though I love my job, would be to geek out doing marketing automation things, and I'm pretty open about that. So yeah, happy to talk with anybody that needs some technical suggestions as well. All right. Any other questions? We got like 3 more minutes.
I think in the meantime, if we don't receive any Q&A questions, we will talk about, because I've seen that we have a lot of clients here that already have a BA. As you were saying, that we can also help them through, you know, like knowing more about tools, about automation, about things that we are implementing inside of our team, inside of our internal team, and that we can help our clients now, because we are testing and seeing what it works, what it doesn't. So
Yes.
if you have any questions on how managing your BAs or perks, or how to, you know, improve your working relationships and stuff like that, we are happy to do it. And also our success team is there to help also you and the VAs, because it's good for them to know that these customer success agents are helping our VAs as well on the other side, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm trying to actually find the perks document that we created for our team, because I think it's a good idea, for example, for them to just see how we're doing that internally, right? But I can't find it, so we're gonna just have to share it with you guys, unless you can pull it up and find it, Alejandra. But I can tell you that one of the key things in general for us is, for that same goal of making sure that all of our team stays for us for the long term, we're finding ways to incentivize people to actually, get more benefits out of working with us. In the end, it all comes down to, yes, more money, but it's not provided just as money. It's provided as perks. We, for example, have, as soon as you're with us for at least 3 months, we provide or I think, or 6 months, we provide like simple like coffee and snacks incentive. We pay people $250 a year extra just so they can go buy coffee, throughout the year for themselves. We have another perk, like I was mentioning, like streaming, for example, Netflix or Amazon, or things like that every year, so that they get that as well. We also recently implemented something brand new, which is covering a percentage of their health insurance. So we're not paying directly for their health insurance. Legally speaking, they got to pay for their own stuff, but we're basically covering a portion of that based on the tenure that they have with us. And that is a big thing. I can tell you, in Latin America, some people don't want to work virtually and by themselves, because they rather get less money per hour, but work with a company that gives them benefits, including health insurance. So trying to counter that, we're creating a program so that people can get paid more, which we already do, and also have that, right? So I don't know if you found the document, Ale.
Yeah, I'm just gonna send it to you.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll share.
It
I mean, it's kind of what I spoke about, but at
Telegram.
least visually, yes. I'm on Telegram too.
There
we go. All right. Perfect. Yeah, so let me share it over here. So yeah, we just updated this in December. We included the before and after of paid time off. Before, there was only a few holidays, mostly just Christmas and New Year. Now we're giving people more of the US-based holidays paid without basically, not paying it for them. So we define that. And here's, for example, the previous perks and new perks, right? But we're just going to show you what they are. So as soon as you're like hired for at least 0 to 3 months, if it's your birthday, we'll do a little surprise. Then after you've been working with us for at least 3 months, you're eligible to receive what we call a productivity bonus. So I basically give our team a bonus twice a year, based on the company's success, and now we're going to change it a bit so that we give them a bonus also based on their performance. So the calculation is going to be a bit different. After 1 year, they get, $150 credit for snacks and coffee. And then after the second anniversary, they get the subscription to things like Spotify. We're also going to be paying for their internet. They have this one-time, let's say, money to pay for office equipment up to $250. And starting on that year 2, they can get paid, in this case, up to 50% of their monthly premium of their health insurance. In this case, up to $30 a month. And they're eligible now for paternity and maternity leave of 2 weeks paid off. And then for year 3, it's kind of the same, plus an extra subscription, in this case, let's say like to Netflix. Then you can buy more expensive office equipment, and you get a little higher percentage of the monthly health insurance premium paid. And then by year 4, we're going to buy them a computer or something that's related to office equipment up to $1,500 and cover up to $100, up to 100% of the monthly health insurance, up to $100 a month, which is more than plenty for most countries in Latin America. So yeah, hopefully that's useful information for people too.
We have 2 more questions before we wrap up.
All right. How are you guys addressing the pension part? I'm sure that is also a concern. Yeah, so we can't address that. The pensions, at least from my understanding, it's usually something that's government related. So we are, not affiliated in any one specific country, so we can't do any of that. And we're not hiring them, anybody as employees. Everybody's an independent contractor, right? So again, all of these things, that's why we're calling them perks. We're not calling them benefits. And then Andrea, when it comes to perks, how can you tell, since the VAs are from all around Latin America and have different contexts, that they work the best for everyone? Great question. Yeah, well, there's no one way to know exactly if the perks are going to be working for everyone based on their country. But we basically did some, not major research before we defined some of these things in terms of what the perks were going to be and if they were going to be, good for them. And I think most of our team sort of agreed. This is just, by the way, internal perks for our people who work as part of Virtual Latinos team. It's not for the people who are working for our clients. That is the next step of our company's ideas and projects. We're going to come up with something very similar to propose to our clients. That's of course optional, 100% optional, but in a way to help them think of ideas to, again, continue to incentivize their assistants. And Ernesto, last question was, I presume the VAs do their own contributions directly to the Social Security. Assuming you're talking about the Social Security in their countries, yes, that's definitely something we do not touch. Our agreements specifically say we don't keep any taxes from our assistants because they're not US-based persons. So we pay them what we promise them, and then it's up to them whether they pay taxes or not. Seguro Social, yeah, that's kind of up to them. The truth is, it is totally not our responsibility. So whether they do that or not, it's up to them. I only know from a few people in Mexico that they're doing something related to that, but it's very different in every country. So that's kind of not part of our, let's say, responsibility. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. We love that you guys came and supported this webinar, and hopefully we'll hear from you in some other way. And if you have any ideas for other topics to cover, we'd love to hear from you, because we'd love to talk about not just assistants, but about how to work with them, how to help you grow your business, whether that's technology and automation, or of course, virtual assistants. So thank you so much, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.